work. So
right,
I would say a different approach. We need to at least we talked to the Soviets during the Cuban crisis. We at least can talk to somebody who we do not have proof that he has a weapon. Why go to war so carelessly?
Let's stay on this theme. We have a question from CNNPolitics.com, a question, you can see it up on the screen here, in regards to Syria. Should the United States intervene, and should we arm the rebellion? Senator Santorum, let me start with you on this one. The American people have watched these videos. It started months ago. It has accelerated in recent days. What is the role for the United States today?
Syria is a puppet state of Iran. They are a threat not just to Israel, but they have been a complete destabilizing force within Lebanon, which is another problem for Israel, and Hezbollah. They are a country that we could do no worse than the leadership in Syria today, which is not the case in some of the other countries that we readily got ourselves involved in. So it's sort of remarkable to me that we would have, here again, I think it's the timidness of this president in dealing with the Iranian threat, because Syria and Iran is an axis. And the president, while he couldn't reach out deliberately to Iran, did reach out immediately to Syria and established an embassy there. And the only reason he removed that embassy was because it was in threatened of being overtaken, not because he was objecting to what was going on in Syria. This president has obviously a very big problem in standing up to the Iranians in any form. If this would have been any other country, given what was going on and the mass murders that we're seeing there, this president would have quickly and joined the international community, which is calling for his ouster and the stop of this. But he's not. He's not, because he's afraid to stand up to Iran. He opposed the sanctions in Iran against the central banks until his own party finally said, "You're killing us. Please support these sanctions." Ladies and gentlemen, we have a president who isn't going to stop them. He isn't going to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. We need a new president, or we are going to have a cataclysmic situation with a power that is the most prolific proliferator of terror in the world, that will be able to do so with impunity because they will have a nuclear weapon to protect them for whatever they do. It has to be stopped, and this president is not in position to do that.
In the question of Syria, Mr. Speaker, then Governor Romney, if you were president today, what would you do differently from this president tomorrow?
Well, look, the first thing I do across the board for the entire region is create a very dramatic American energy policy of opening up federal lands and opening up offshore drilling, replacing the EPA. The Iranians have been practicing closing the Straits of Hormuz, which has 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil in the world going through it. We have enough energy in the United States that we would be the largest producer of oil in the world by the end of this decade. We would be capable of saying to the Middle East, we frankly don't care what you do. The Chinese have a big problem because they ain't going to have any oil. But we would not have to be directly engaged. It's a very different question. But first of all, you got to set the stage, I think, here to not be afraid of what might happen in the region. Second, we clearly should have our allies, this is an old-fashioned word, we should have our allies covertly helping destroy the Assad regime. There are plenty of Arab-speaking groups that would be quite happy. There are lots of weapons available in the Middle East. And I agree with Senator Santorum's point. This is an administration which, as long as you're America's enemy, you're safe. You know, the only people you got to worry about is if you're an American ally.
Governor?
I agree with both these gentlemen. It's very interesting that you're seeing on the Republican platform a very strong commitment to say we're going to say no to Iran. It's unacceptable for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And Rick is absolutely right. Syria is their key ally. It's their only ally in the Arab world. It is also their route to the sea. Syria provides a shadow over Lebanon. Syria is providing the armament of Hezbollah in Lebanon that, of course, threatens Israel, our friend and ally. We have very bad news that's come from the Middle East over the past several months, a lot of it in part because of the feckless leadership of our president. But one little piece of good news, and that is the key ally of Iran, Syria, has a leader that's in real trouble. And we got to grab a hold of that like it's the best thing we've ever seen. There's things that we're having a hard time getting our hands around, like what's happening in Egypt. But in Syria, with Assad in trouble, we need to communicate to the Alawites, his friends, his ethnic group, to say, look, you have a future if you'll abandon that guy Assad. We need to work with Saudi Arabia and with Turkey to say, you guys, provide the kind of weaponry that's needed to help the rebels inside Syria. This is a critical time for us. If we can turn Syria and Lebanon away from Iran, we finally have the capacity to get Iran to pull back, and we can, at that point, with crippling sanctions and a very clear statement that military action is an action that will be taken if they pursue nuclear weaponry, that can change the course of world history.
Let's try to get another question.
John.
Congressman, quickly, please.
No, I get a minute. Real quickly. You know, I've tried the moral argument, I've tried the constitutional argument on these issues, and they don't go so well. But there's an economic argument as well. Matter of fact, Al-Qaeda's had a plan to bog us down in the Middle East and bankrupt this country. That's exactly what they're doing. We've spent $4 trillion of debt in the last 10 years being bogged down in the Middle East. The neoconservatives who now want us to be in Syria, want us to go to Iran and have another war. And we don't have the money. We're already, today, gasoline hit $6 a gallon in Florida, and we don't have the money. So I don't believe I'm going to get the conversion on the moral and the constitutional arguments in the near future, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to win this argument for economic reasons. Just remember when the Soviets left. They left not because we had to fight them, they left because they bankrupted this country, and we better wake up, because that is what we're doing here. We're destroying our currency, and we have a financial crisis on our hands.
Let's take another question from our audience, please. Identify yourself and ask your question.
I'm Marcia Crossman from Scottsdale, Arizona. What is your stand on education reform and the No Child Left Behind Act?
This came up a bit early in the debate. Some of you mentioned it in a general way. Senator Santorum, to you first specifically. What do you do about No Child Left Behind today if you're president?
Well, you know what? I supported No Child Left Behind. I supported it. It was the principal priority of President Bush. To try to take on a failing education system and try to impose some sort of testing regime that would be able to quantify how well we're doing with respect to education. I have to admit, I voted for that. It was against the principles I believed in, but you know, when you're part of the team, sometimes you take one for the team for the leader, and I made a mistake. You know, politics is a team sport, folks. And sometimes you gotta rally together and do something. And in this case, you know, I thought testing was, and finding out how bad the problem wasn't a bad idea. What was a bad idea was all the money that was put out there, and that, in fact, was a huge problem. I admit the mistake, and I will not make that mistake again. You have someone who is committed. Look, I'm a homeschooling father of 7. I know the importance of customized education for our children. I know the importance of parental control of education. I know the importance of local control of education. And having gone through that experience of the federal government involvement, not only do I believe the federal government should get out of the education business, I think the state government should start to get out of the education business and put it back to the state, to the local, and into the community.
Governor Romney, you were a governor, you had to deal with this law, so weigh in. And as you do, it's designed, like it or not, to help the public school system, which has struggled. Senator Santorum just the other day called public schools in this country factories.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that unless you'd like to. With regards to your question, I came into a state where Republicans and Democrats had worked, before I got there, to make some very important changes. They said that they were going to test our kids every year. They said to graduate from high school, you're going to have to pass an exam in English and math. I was the first governor that had to enforce that provision. There were a lot of people that said, oh, no, 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 let people graduate even if they can't pass that exam. I enforced it. We fought it. It was hard to do. We added more school choice. My legislature tried to say no more charter schools. I vetoed that. We overturned that. With school choice, testing our kids, giving our best teachers opportunities for advancement. These kinds of principles drove our schools to be pretty successful. As a matter of fact, there are 4 measures on which the federal government looks at schools state by state. And my state's #1 of all 50 states in all 4 of those measures, 4th and 8th graders in English and math. Those principles, testing our kids, excellent curriculum, superb teachers, and school choice, those are the answers to help our schools. And with regards to No Child Left Behind, the right answer there, this President Bush stood up and said, you know what, the teachers' unions don't want school choice. I want school choice to see who's succeeding and failing. He was right to fight for that. There are things that should be changed in the law, but we have to stand up to the federal teachers' unions and put the kids first and the unions behind.
Mr. Speaker, on that point, On that point, this is a conversation about what is the proper role of the federal government in the education issue. To the point the governor just raised about teachers' unions. You have complimented President Obama to a degree on that issue, saying he had some courage to stand up to the teachers' union. You went on tour with Al Sharpton and this president's education secretary in support of the multi-billion-dollar Race to the Top program that is essentially, I think they use stimulus money for it, but incentives to states, to schools that perform and that enact reforms.
What we did is we went around, including Tucson in this state, and we talked about the importance of charter schools, which was the one area where I thought the president did, in fact, show some courage, being willing to go into Philadelphia or into Baltimore or in a variety of places and advocate. We were in Montgomery, Alabama, for example, and say charter schools are an important step in the right direction. There are two things wrong with the president's approach, and the reason I would, frankly, dramatically shrink the Federal Department of Education down to doing nothing but research, return all the power under the 10th Amendment back to the states. And I agree with Rick's point. I would urge the states then to return most of that power back to the local communities, and I'd urge the local communities to return most of the power back to the parents. I mean, I think the fact is we bought over the last 50 years 3 huge mistakes. We bought the mistake that the teachers' unions actually cared about the kids. It's increasingly clear they care about protecting bad teachers. And if you look at LA Unified, it is almost criminal what we do to the poorest children in America, entrapping them into places. No Nation Left Behind said if a foreign power did this to our children, we declared an act of war because they're doing so much damage. The second thing we bought into was the whole school of education theory that you don't have to learn, you have to learn about how you would learn. So when you finish learning about how you learn, you have self-esteem because you're told you have self-esteem, even if you can't read the word self-esteem. And the third thing we bought, which Rick alluded to, which is really important, we bought this notion that you could have Carnegie units and you could have state standards and you could have a curriculum everybody living. Every child is unique. Every teacher is unique. Teaching is a missionary vocation. When you bureaucratize it, you kill it. We need a fundamental rethinking from the ground up.
Congressman Paul.
News going in the right direction, but not far enough. The Constitution is very clear. There's no authority for the federal government to be involved in education. There's no prohibition in the Constitution for the states to be involved in education. That's not a bad position, and we can sort things out. But once again, the senators was for No Child Left Behind, but now he's running for president. Now he's running to repeal No Child Left Behind once again. But and he calls this a team sport. He has to go along to get along, and that's the way the team plays. But that's what the problem is with Washington. That's what's been going on for so long. So I don't accept that form of government. I understand it. That is the way it works. You were with the majority, you were the whip, and you organized and got these votes all passed. But I think the obligation of all of us should be the oath of office. We should take it. It shouldn't be the oath to the party. I'm sorry about that. But it isn't the oath to the party. It's the oath to our office to obey the law, and the law is the Constitution.
Gentlemen, thank you. One more break. When we come back, the final question of what could be the final Republican debate.